The winter of 1978. The ice storm came in the night like a fist closing over the land. For 3 days the power lines lay broken under the weight of frozen trees, and the house grew cold with a silence that pressed against the ears. The kitchen table where I sat in my heaviest wool coat felt like a stone slab, and my breath hung before me in small clouds that dissolved slowly into the dim air. I watched the frost creep across the inside of the windows, not slowly but leaf by leaf, as if an invisible gardener was planting a white moss that would soon cover everything. My wife held a cup of tea gone cold between her palms, her knuckles white. The sound of branches cracking in the distant woods came like rifle shots, and I remembered the winters of my childhood village, where the old people would say the cold mountain spirits were walking the ridges. That night I made a small lamp from a jar and a scrap of copper pipe I had saved in the garage, nestled among coffee cans of salvaged screws. The warmth it gave was modest. It did not fill the room, but it kept one corner alive, a pocket of breathable air where we could sit and watch the small flame, a pet of heat. That little lamp burned for hours on fuel we already had in the house, alcohol from the first aid kit. It asked for no electricity, no special tools, no expensive parts. It only asked to be understood. What I will show you today is the grandson of that first cold night lamp, a heater you can build that will burn steady and long, that will warm a small room, that requires no wick you must ever replace, only fuel, only the old knowing. And I will tell you what university engineers later confirmed about why this works. But first I must hold one secret for the middle, a small detail my grandfather taught me about how fire breathes. Fire, you see, is not just light. It is a creature that drinks and exhales, and if you do not feed it properly, it withers. My name is Michael. I came to this country from Japan many years ago, from a village so small that the mountains held it like 2 cupped hands. The village sat in a narrow valley where the rice paddies climbed the slopes in terraced steps, and the mist from the river would rise every morning to meet the forest. My grandfather was a man who kept what others threw away. In his workshop, a low earthen-floored shed behind the house, every broken handle could become a new handle. Every rusted blade could be sharpened until the metal remembered its purpose. I can still smell the cedar shavings and the tang of whetstone oil. He did not know the word recycling. He only knew the word matanai, the deep regret of wasting what still holds usefulness. It is a word that lives in my bones, a word I cannot enter a hardware store without hearing. I say this gently, as a guest in your country, but I notice that the modern world has forgotten how to look at an empty jar and see a heater. It is not your fault. The stores here teach you to buy a solution, always in a box, always with a plug. But the solution was already in your hands, and that is matanai. What a waste to forget it. When I see a clean glass jar heading for the recycling bin, I hear my grandfather's voice across the ocean. Matanai, that jar still has work to do. So I take it home, and my wife smiles because she knows. Now, before we go further, I have a small request. In the comments below, tell me where you live and what you grow. A vegetable, a flower, a single tomato plant on a balcony, it does not matter. I read every one. Knowing what you grow tells me something about the soil of your life, the patch of earth you tend, and it brings me great joy. It is like receiving a postcard from a friend I have not met. Most folks, when they think of emergency heat, reach for the wrong things. They buy propane heaters that roar like angry dragons and consume fuel so fast you can watch the needle drop. They buy generators that need gasoline, but gasoline goes stale in storage, turning to varnish in the tank. They buy many expensive devices, each one promising safety, each one fragile in its own way. Electronic ignition boards that fail, fans that seize, plastic housings that crack when the cold gets deep. I have seen neighbors stack these machines in their garages like a museum of good intentions, and when the storm comes, half of them do not start. What they miss is this: a flame does not need to be large to warm a room. A large fire is a shouting man who exhausts himself quickly. A small steady flame is a quiet friend who stays all night. The heat must be gathered and held and released slowly, like sunlight held in a stone wall after dusk. Like the river stones my grandfather placed in the hearth embers each winter evening, and then wrapped in old cloth, laid at the foot of our futon. This is the refrain. We are not making a big fire. We are making a long fire, and we are building a stone to catch it. Let me walk you through the method. This is what I have learned across many winters, many attempts, and a few small scars. 1. The vessel. You will need a glass jar with a metal lid. A mason jar works beautifully, the thick-walled kind that can handle the heat of canning. A pasta sauce jar. The large one that held tomatoes and basil works just as well. What matters is that the glass is thick enough to handle warmth without cracking, and that the metal lid can be worked. Hold the jar up to a light and look for hairline cracks or bubbles. If the glass has an imperfection, the heat will find it. Do not use plastic lids. They will soften, they will fail, they will give off smells that do not belong in your breathing air. This is not fussy advice. Ask me how I know. In my first attempts, I tried a thin pickle jar with a rubber-sealed lid. The rubber melted, the lid warped, and I learned to respect the glass. In the center of the metal lid, you must make a hole. The hole will accept a copper pipe that descends into the jar like a straw into a drink. The pipe should stand a few inches above the lid. 2 inches, 3 inches. This is good. If you make it taller, the flame will grow taller. The draft inside the pipe pulls the alcohol vapor upward with more vigor. If you keep it short, the flame will be modest, like a candle that hummed quietly. I have made both. The tall one, 5 or 6 inches above the lid, produces a heat that astonishes, a torch-like flame that can warm a workshop corner. But let us start simply. A pipe that rises 2 inches is enough to warm your hands and your heart. I keep a length of copper pipe in my workshop, salvaged from a plumbing repair, and a pipe cutter that makes a clean square end. The copper should be clean. No green corrosion, no old solder blobs inside, which can release fumes when heated. Scour the outside with steel wool until it blushes pink, and wipe the inside with a rag on a string. To cut the hole, a step bit works well. Go slowly. The metal lid will sometimes buckle or spin if you press too hard. The whorl of metal will grab the bit and wrinkle. Use light pressure. Let the tool eat. If the hole ends up a little jagged, do not despair. We will seal it later. If you have no step bit, a sharp nail and a small triangular file can open the hole with patience. The same patience my grandfather showed when he bored holes in wooden lamp bases with a hand drill, turning the crank for what seemed like hours. His face would grow calm, as if the work was a meditation. I suggest you find that same stillness. The copper pipe should fit the hole snugly, with as little gap as possible around its circumference. 2. The hidden wick. This is the secret the modern world has largely forgotten, buried under catalogs of disposable cartridges. A wick is not just a string that burns. A wick is a road that fuel travels upward, a road that should never collapse or end. Most wicks burn away. Cotton wicks char and shrink, leaving a blackened nub you must trim and tease with tweezers. Fiberglass wicks are better, but still they degrade over time, growing brittle. What I have used for years now, is carbon felt. It looks like a thick, dark cloth, almost like a heavy wool, but it can survive heat that would turn steel red. It does not burn, it only carries fuel. This is the forever part of the forever candle. You can find carbon felt at specialty supply stores. It is used for insulation in high-temperature applications, for soldering stations, for blacksmithing. A small sheet will last you many heaters. You will wrap a piece of this carbon felt around a smaller copper pipe, one that slides inside the larger pipe that rises from your lid. The felt must be snug. This is the most delicate part of the whole craft. If the felt is too thick, it will bunch and jam as you slide it into the outer pipe, like a sweater sleeve that catches. If it is too thin, it will not pull the fuel high enough, and the flame will starve even though alcohol still sloshes in the jar. I have sat at my workbench, evening after evening, adjusting this fit until my fingers knew the texture by heart. You can stretch the felt slightly, pulling it lengthwise, which thins it just enough. A technique I discovered by accident when I tugged it in frustration. A little trial, a little patience. My grandfather would say that the hands learn faster than the head. Trust your hands, let them feel the resistance and tell you when it is right. Once the felt-wrapped inner pipe slides fully into the outer pipe, you want a bit of felt peeking out the top. 1/2 inch is good. This exposed crown is where the flame will dance, a dark halo that drinks and gives fire. The felt trails down the full length of the pipe, all the way to the bottom of the jar, where it will drink the fuel continuously like a root into water. Now here is a detail that makes all the difference. Along the section of pipe that will be submerged inside the jar, drill a series of small holes, 4 holes, 5 holes, no larger than a matchstick, scattered along the length, maybe an inch above the bottom, another an inch above that, and so on. These holes allow your fuel to reach the felt from all sides, not only from the very bottom opening. The wick stays saturated along its whole length. The flame never starves, even when the fuel level runs low. My grandfather did not know this from a book. He knew it from watching the way water climbs a cloth dipped into a bucket at only one corner, and how much faster it climbs if the cloth touches the water fully. He would show me this with a rag and a basin in the garden, the afternoon light catching the darkening cotton. The university folks later confirmed the capillary action, the surface area to volume ratio. I smile when I read their papers. The old people already knew, and they used this knowing to keep their lamps burning through the long mountain winters. 3. The seal. You will have a gap where the copper pipe meets the metal lid. Even a small gap is a place where vapor can escape, and vapor near a flame is a danger. You must seal it completely. There is a product called JB Weld, the quick-setting kind. Mix equal parts of the black and the white, the resin and the hardener, until you have a uniform gray paste with no streaks. Work it around the seam, both above and below the lid, with a small wooden stick like a popsicle stick. Do this gently, like applying medicine to a wound. It cures in minutes, becoming as hard as stone. It will not crack with the heat of the pipe, nor will it soften when the jar warms. This seal is your safety. Do not skip it. If you have small gaps from a jagged cut, fill them completely, smoothing the paste with a wet fingertip. Let it cure fully before lighting. An extra honest caution, which I learned in the earliest years. If the seal is incomplete, alcohol vapor can seep out around the base of the pipe. When you first light the wick, a soft blue whoosh may race across the lid, a brief ghost flame. The first time this happened to me, my heart did not slow for an hour. I sat down and stared at the jar for a long time. Then I cleaned the lid, reapplied the sealant, and waited. Matinee of good sense. To let a gap teach you twice. Once was enough. Seal the lid fully. The flame inside the jar must live only at the top of the wick, nowhere else. 4. The fuel. What you put in the jar decides the soul of your heater. Denatured alcohol, the kind sold in hardware stores for marine stoves and paint cleanup, burns so clean that the flame is nearly invisible in daylight. A ghost flame. It produces almost no soot, very little smell, a faint sweetness, like something just cleaned, and good steady heat. I keep a gallon in the garage, in a metal can, away from sunlight, the cap sealed tight. It will last for years. Rubbing alcohol, the high percentage kind. 99% isopropyl alcohol if you can find it, often in electronics supply stores. Also works, but it burns a little more yellow, a little more visible, and leaves a touch more residue. I will not pretend this one is magic. The higher the purity, the cleaner the burn. But in an emergency, use what you have. A 70% alcohol will still burn, will still warm you. The lower the purity, the more water it contains, so the flame is cooler and may leave a thin white film of mineral salts on the copper pipe. When I use such fuel, I clean the pipe after each session with a soft cloth and a bit of vinegar. In a pinch, even high-proof grain alcohol can serve, though I do not recommend the drinking kind. It is motinee to burn food, and the flame will have more yellow and a slight soot. Always store your fuel in a metal container, never in a plastic milk jug that sunlight degrades. Label it clearly. Not for drinking. Keep it away from children. The fuel is patient, but it is also unforgiving if mistreated. Now I must speak a careful word about safety. I say this with love, not as a warning meant to frighten you. Any flame inside your home must be respected, like a welcome guest who can nonetheless start a fire. Alcohol burns very clean, but it still consumes the oxygen in a room and gives off carbon dioxide and trace amounts of other gases you should not breathe for hours in a sealed space. If you run this heater, crack a window, even an inch will let fresh air in. If you have a fireplace with a working flue, set the heater inside the hearth, The warmth radiates out, but the fumes draw up and away, and the stone hearth contains any accident. Place it where a child cannot reach it, where a pet cannot knock it over. The copper pipe will grow hot enough to brand skin. Over 600 degrees Fahrenheit at its base, over 900 near the flame tip. I have a small scar on my thumb from the first winter I experimented. I was careless for one moment, reaching over the jar while the flame danced, and the metal taught me a lesson I can still feel. Never move the heater while it burns. Let it cool, let it sleep, before your hands come near, and pay special attention to the invisible flame. When you burn denatured alcohol, you may see nothing but a shimmer like heat on a distant road. I tie a piece of bright red ribbon around the upper pipe, so that even when the flame is invisible, the ribbon reminds me, here lives fire. My wife once waved her hand over it, thinking it had gone out, and the heat startled her. Treat a lit heater as alive, even if your eyes tell you nothing is there. There is a small gadget I have learned to trust, one of the few modern tools I welcome without reservation. It is a little sensor that sniffs the air and screams if something is wrong. A carbon monoxide and smoke alarm. It runs on batteries, so it works even when Edison's power abandons you. I have one in my workshop, mounted on the wall. I strongly recommend you have one too, and test it with the button every season. It is the honest companion to any flame, a guardian that never sleeps. Safety is not a timid act. It is the deepest form of respect for the fire. My grandfather would have called it the samurai spirit applied to the hearth. Vigilance without fear. 5. The heat capture. A naked flame warms only what it touches, the air directly above it, the piece of ceiling nobody can feel. But if you suspend a metal or ceramic object above the flame, a flower pot turned upside down, a stainless steel mesh, even a clean tin can with holes punched, that object will drink the heat and radiate it slowly, like a gentle second sun. I use a simple clay flower pot, the kind with a hole in the bottom, unglazed for better heat transfer. I set it on a few metal spacers, leftover decking brackets, small L brackets, or even 3 tall nuts from the hardware store, placed on their sides so the hot air can flow upward and around the pot in a smooth, even column. The pot grows warm, then hot, and it holds the heat like a memory, releasing it into the room long after you might expect. My wife places her damp garden gloves on a rack above the pot, and by morning they are dry and warm. This is not a new idea. My grandfather, in that snowy village, used stones from the riverbank, smooth gray stones that had been smoothed by centuries of water. He would heat them in the coals of the Irori hearth, then wrap them in heavy cotton cloth and place them at the foot of our futon. All night they gave back the sun's memory, and I would curl my toes near them, feeling the profound comfort of something solid holding the heat. Same principle. Defeat the cold by giving the heat something dense to live in. When you first light your heater, you may need to be patient. The alcohol deep in the jar does not yet know it must climb. The felt is dry. Prime the wick by wetting the exposed carbon felt at the top with a few drops of fuel, just enough to dampen it. Use a long match, or better yet, a kitchen torch, one of those refillable lighters that clicks and throws a jet of blue flame. Touch the flame to the damp felt. It will catch, and at first the flame may be small, hesitant, perhaps more yellow as impurities in the felt burn off in a faint wisp of smoke. Then, as the inner copper pipe warms and the alcohol begins to vaporize up its length, the flame stabilizes and grows. You will hear a faint sound, almost like a distant whisper, the gentle huff of air moving. This is the heater finding its breath. The chimney effect in the pipe pulls air and vapor upward, and the fire settles into a steady rhythm. Once the copper pipe is fully warm, and this takes minutes, not instant, the flame will reach upward, steady and strong. If you used pure denatured alcohol, the flame will be pale blue at the base, nearly transparent at the tips, and you can see it best against a dark background, like a sheet of black paper held behind it. The temperature above the pipe, right at the flame's tip, can reach over 900 degrees Fahrenheit. I have measured it with an infrared thermometer, the little red dot dancing on the copper. 900 degrees, the heat of a bread oven, enough to warm a small room from freezing to a comfortable living temperature. My greenhouse, which in January nights would otherwise dip below 32 Fahrenheit, stays above 40 with 2 of these little heaters working together, their clay pots glowing faintly in the dark. The tomato seedlings and the bonsai trees and the persimmon saplings all survive because of flame and copper and the old ways. I want to speak now gently about what the modern industry has done, for I have watched it happen over the decades of my life here. Walk into any large store, and you will find a heater for your feet, a heater for your desk, a heater for your tent, a heater that plugs into your car. There are ceramic towers that oscillate, and oil-filled radiators that click, and infrared panels that promise the warmth of the sun. Each one is made of plastic that will one day lie in the ground and never return to the soil. Each one requires the grid. Each one comes in a box that promises comfort and safety but delivers dependence. And each one will quietly fail after a few years when its tiny circuit board gives up. The industry has sold you a gadget for every task, and in doing so, made you forget the free knowing that lives in your own hands. My grandfather's village had no stores. It had elders who could make a stove from a discarded oil drum, a lamp from a chipped bowl, a blanket from rice sacks filled with straw. They did not see poverty in these devices. They saw matanai, the shape of usefulness, still living inside the thing that was cast away. I walk these bright, towering aisles, and I feel a gentle sadness, not anger. I love this country. I chose this country, but I notice when the power fails, the new becomes silent and the old whispers, I am still here. That is matanai. Do not throw away the knowing. The same hands that can swipe a card and order a heater with next-day delivery are the hands that can shape a copper pipe and fill a jar. Fire is the first teacher. Our ancestors huddled around it, and they learned that a rock warmed by fire holds heat long after the flames die. The industry forgot this, but you can remember. Let me now gather the threads, so they are not lost in the weaving. A glass jar with a metal lid, thick-walled, no cracks, is your vessel. A copper pipe, outer and inner, fitted and sealed with JB Weld, rises from the lid, carbon felt, wrapped snug around the inner pipe and drinking from small holes along its submersed length, is your forever wick. Pure alcohol, denatured, high percentage, is your fuel. Poured into the jar until it is no more than 2/3 full, leaving room for vapor. The flame, invisible by day, hot and steady, lives atop the felt. A clay flower pot or metal mesh suspended above captures the heat and radiates it softly into the room. A battery-operated alarm watches over your sleep. No wick to replace, no electricity needed, only fuel added when the jar runs dry. A heater that waits in the closet for the winter storm, for the power outage, for the moment when the modern world pauses and you become again the keeper of your own warmth. Each part is simple, each part durable, each part a testimony to the old way of seeing that says, nothing is truly finished while it still has purpose. I would like to ask you again to leave a comment. Tell me, if you built this heater, what room would you warm first? Where do you live? And what grows in your garden? I read these comments in the evening, after the workshop is clean and the tools are put away, and I hold a cup of green tea. They are a window into your lives, and I am grateful. Your words are like a neighbor's tap on the door, reminding me I am not alone in this remembering. We are not separate from the old people. We only forgot that we are them. The hands that plant the seed are the same hands that can build the flame. The knowing does not die. It only waits, patient as a stone in the river, to be remembered. That is the matanai of wisdom. What a waste to let it slip away. Take care of your fire. Take care of your home. The cold comes, but it does not win. The old people knew. A flame is a friend. Treat it well, and it will sit with you through the longest night.